Oh my goodness, we got the black pieces again. Rigged. All right, what should we play against e4? We got black again. All right, let's play the Caro-Kann. I'll go c6. What can we learn about this here? There we go, main line, right? Of course they're gonna take the center. Okay, c6, d5, knight to c3 by white, and he knows what he's doing. He knows his theory. Takes, knight takes is, I mean, no matter where white puts that knight, this is the main line, so I'm gonna continue with that. We'll see if he has any magic here, or if it's just gonna be knight takes pawn, which I certainly expect. All right. I like this opponent already. He's taking his time on even the first couple moves, which I absolutely think is a way healthier way to approach rapid than the people who are bulleting every move. So, look, if you want to take 15, 20 seconds and make sure knight takes pawn is okay, I think you're on the right track, buddy. Okay, after knight takes, there's I would say two main moves. There's a few different lines to play, but bishop f5, knight g3 is kind of like very, very old main line. Knight f6 is rather trendy line that people play nowadays. And there are other moves, but I would say those are the two main moves by far here. Bishop to f5 and knight f6. Personally, I like knight f6 a little more. Bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6. That's like old theory. It's still good, but I find it a little bit boring. Knight f6, knight takes. You can spice it up with g takes f6 or just e takes, and the double pawns on f6 give you a very double-edged game. So I am going to go with knight f6, and we'll see if we can get him to capture. It looks really weird to take double pawns voluntarily, which is why a lot of people played knight d7 and then knight there to take back the knight. But these double pawns are actually really good, and it's honestly a shame we didn't even get to see them in action because my opponent has just brought his knight back to c3. Now, huge mistake for a Caro-Kann player would be to play e6. Awful move. Awful blunder. I'll go so far as to call it a blunder. No, it's not actually a blunder, but it just goes against the whole mantra of the opening. You play c6, d5 to leave this bishop open, get it open as early as possible. You need to develop this bishop before you play e6, plain and simple. So bishop g4 or bishop f5, to me, are the only moves worth considering, right? Knight d7 even doesn't make sense because it blocks your bishop. e6 to get this guy out, well, solve this bishop first. So need to play these two moves. In general, bishop g4 without a knight there is never going to make as much sense to me. So I'm more of a bishop f5 kind of guy. Now e6 will pretty much be my next move. We'll wait and see what he does, obviously, but now that I've got the bishop out, e6, right? I want this bishop to go to e7 or d6. This knight goes to d7. And the way that I just, like these arrows right here, that's exactly the way the setup is going to look for the Caro-Kann very, very often. So it's worth remembering these basic squares for the pieces. All right, he played bishop d3, challenged my bishop. That's fine. I can either go back or take it. I'm just going to keep it real simple for the moment, and I'm going to take. So that I don't get double pawns here at all. Nothing. Just a nice clean pawn structure. What's my next move? Definitely going to be e6. You want to play e6 pretty much as fast as possible in this opening. But of course, you'd never want to do it before you get your bishop out. So we can see I'm sort of accomplishing that. And whoa, What a strange decision. Now, the only way that I could give my opponent a pat on the back here is by saying, nice job. You did not bring your queen out early. I know this move looks crazy, but this guy, I can already tell, is going to have a much more successful game than most players at this rating because he's not bringing his queen out. And he might be doing it to his detriment here, but there's a reason that he's probably going to be better off than people who play, you know, queen h5, queen f3, go for scholar's mate. He's playing a real opening here. He clearly didn't want to bring his queen out. You know, while it's not a good move here, obviously, I can give him a little bit of, I can give him some props for not wanting to bring the queen out. Now, that being said, we're not going easy here. I'm going to take this free pawn. That's why you should have taken with the queen. I have no qualms with taking that. Right? I know it's annoying that we're going to have to deal with some moves that attack our queen, but what am I looking to do? I'm looking to go in, capture, and go right back out. So we'll wait and see where our opponent moves, but one piece of advice I have, and that I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with this concept, but you would be surprised that most of the time, the square that your queen just came from is the safest square on the board. I know it looks stupid to go like all the way back where you just went, but I will point out that a lot of people are afraid to like go back there because it feels like a waste of time. But very often this is the best square because you can still pivot later to whichever side of the board you want. And oftentimes people bring their queen out and then they try to justify their queen out. They're like, oh yeah, I brought my queen out, so we got to make this work. So they play a move like queen here. And then all of a sudden they get attacked later by more pieces. Knight e2, a3, they go here, b4, they go here, knight on e2, white plays bishop f4. It's like you're moving your queen 50 times. Like, relax. Queen d7, oh, my knight wanted to go there. Queen d6, oh, blocks my bishop. Queen e5, oh, knight f3. So I'm just saying, it's not crazy to move your queen back all the way to d8 or d1, depending which color you are. Like, it's not going to be the worst thing you've ever done. Right? Queen h4, knight here. Now, queen g4 is the perfect example, in my opinion, perfect example of a move that I'm tempted by, but I'm not going to play in this current position, I think. I'm going to analyze it, but I don't think I'm going to play it. So queen g4, if he takes it, I play knight takes, I am the happiest person ever. Because I just won a pawn, and now my next thing I'm doing is trading queens. Perfect! It's great. Right? So queen g4. But what I'm at least considering is the possibility that white might play queen b3. And it's like, okay, I take here, you take here, I take here, you take there, I take there. It's like, what the hell's going on there? I don't know. Like, I can't even verify what's happening at that point. So I'm a little nervous about doing that. And I just think so many times bringing the queen back is the healthiest thing to do. So in this position, I actually think queen g4 might be a slightly better move. But I think it's more instructive to play a move like queen d8. It's so safe, so simple. I'm hoping that that it'll be a good reminder that, you know, once you bring your queen out, you don't need to leave it there. All right, he plays d4. What did I say was the most important move in this whole opening? We're going to play it right now. It's e6. Not going to think twice. Where does this knight go? You already know. Where does this bishop go? Either one of these squares, you will not be making a mistake. Both are very, very acceptable. So this, and castle. Absolutely what I want to be doing my next 3 moves. Unless he threatens something. But I see too many low-rated players like... First of all, I always say don't bring your queen out. But okay, in this case, I brought my queen out to nab a pawn. But listening to my own advice, I'm not going to like keep my queen out there because she's just going to get in trouble, get harassed, attacked. Not worth it. I suppose I could bring the bishop out first. I'm going to be a little bit more ambitious and play bishop d6. The knight d7 and castle in my next couple moves. Why not bishop b4? Well, you guys tell me. After bishop b4, are you planning to take this knight? Honest question. Are you planning to take the knight? Because if you're not planning to take the knight, then that's already your answer right there. If you're not planning to take the knight, then why the hell is the bishop there? You're going to get attacked. You're like queen there, pawn there. If you're not planning to take the knight, then that's your answer right there. Why the hell are you putting the bishop there? If you are planning to take the knight, then we can go a step further and say, well, you probably shouldn't because your pawns are all on light squares. Your dark squares are going to be super weak. And white has an isolated pawn. And you're going to fix that for him and give him control of the d5 square with the c pawn. Connect a pawn to the d pawn so it's not isolated anymore. Many reasons. Let's castle. There's a big difference, you know, for the most part, between the queen side and the king side. So a lot of us play bishop g4, right? Or bishop g5. It's a very important concept. You play bishop g4, you play bishop g5. You're pinning the knight to what? The queen, right? On the other side of the board, what are you pinning the knight to? The king. The king almost always vacates to castle, meaning eventually you're going to be pinning the knight to nothing. So you either got to take the knight or the knight's going to move. If you're not planning to take the knight, then you're not serving any purpose there because you're not pinning the knight to anything. Double pawns right here are a lot worse for black and white than double pawns here. So you're not inflicting as much damage with a pin over here. And most importantly, when someone plays bishop g5 and you play h6 and they go back, they don't capture the knight and they keep the pin. You never really want to play g5, right? That weakens where your king's going to go. But guess what? The queen side's not the same. There's no kings over there usually. So if someone pins me with bishop b4, yes, I am going to play a3. And if you keep the pin with bishop a5, first of all, there's no pin usually because the king's castled, but I don't care. I'm going to play b4. a3, b4 helps me gain space, whereas h6, g5 weakens my king. So much worse for me to deal with a pin on the king side, which is why bishop g5 and bishop g4 are important moves. Pins on the queen side don't actually mean as much. They're not, they don't hurt as much. I'm going to take though. He's threatening my bishop and he's offering me a trade. I'm not going to overthink here. Let's just take and bring our other knight in. He has an isolated pawn. The number one thing you do when you see your opponent has an isolated pawn is control the square in front of it. So we're doing that literally to the maximum here. We're executing perfectly. Moves I'm thinking about next are like h6, and then literally like knight d5. So I'm going to go with h6. This is just a good habits move to play. Get an escape square, stop maybe a pin or an knight g5 move. Just feels good. My opponent should be bringing rooks to the middle, or maybe playing h3 themselves. That would be a good one. Knight e5 is an example of a hasty move that he may not realize is a mistake. Nice move. Very nice move. I like h3 a lot. Obviously, I just played h6, so it's a perfect time to do it. But stops knight g4, and in general, it's just a very high-quality move. So I want to bring a rook to the d file. There's no question about that. I probably want to bring my queen to one side. Queen d7 is okay, but you know, maybe I might want to double rooks there. Knight d5 looks great. Moving the queen out of the way looks great. Moves I would never want to do, e5 and c5. Never, ever. This pawn is weak. I want to use these pawns to keep it there. So I don't like c5. I know there's some people that are really interested in c5, but you guys are just playing for tricks. Pawn takes bishop h2. Now, what's the likelihood that works here? Probably close to 100%. But does that mean c5 is a good move? Hell no. White should move the queen, and all of a sudden I'm trading off. I have to trade off my pawn for white's weakness. So that is absolutely not how to play chess. I'm going to move my queen somewhere. I'm going to go to a5. I was thinking about b6. Don't love that because of the bishop. I was thinking about c7. Don't love that because of the rook. Thinking about e7. Same idea with the rook. Just put it somewhere safe. And now look to bring a rook to the d file. Yeah, so this is just getting out of the way. If bishop goes back to d2, then maybe I could go to b6. Now the bishop's not there, and I'm making a threat. Plus, I have this amazing d5 square that my queen can always use. So again, let's bring a rook exactly where we said we wanted it. Kind of ignoring this move. I'm assuming that he wants to play b4, but again, not terribly bothered by that. Queen has probably two main squares I'd look to move here. One of them is d5. The other one is f5. f5 is going to make a lot less sense, but I actually believe it's the better move here. It's like, why would I double my pawns like that? Well, after I double them, I still have control of the d5 square, and f4 to kick the bishop out. Slowly start to gain my space over there. So I'm a big fan of this, even though technically I think queen d5, keeping the pawn structure intact is nice. I'm actually just a very big fan of this. Why not queen h5? I just don't know what I'm doing there on h5. Seems to me like I'm doing absolutely nothing. So trying to move somewhere useful. Okay. I'll trade the queens, because hopefully now we can focus on how to play against an isolated pawn. The first thing that I would like to point out is that a trade of knights is very okay for me. Bishop against bishop I want to have. If I trade bishop for knight, that's also great for me. Big fan of that. Objectively, the least attractive trade for me here is knight for bishop. Because like my bishop's great, but I don't really want to hand him a knight. If he has a knight, I'd probably rather have a knight. I don't really like trading my knight for the bishop, and I don't really like trading the bishop for the bishop. So my favorite situations are where he has a bishop, and it's either against my knight or my bishop. And that's because his pawns are starting to become locked and fixed on dark squares. So I want him to have that bishop later. He's going to only be playing defense with it. So now that I've established that, after I play knight d5, let's say I play it, I would never consider taking, because I've already worked out in my head. I have no interest in capturing that bishop. I've already worked that out. Me, I'm going to play rook d7, rook d8, just start to maximize the pressure there. Again, knight e5 is still a way that my opponent could go wrong here. Needs to be careful of that. But we have an isolated pawn to play against, and hopefully this is relatively instructive, but you really don't want to rush. There's a lot of good plans here for black. Like, it's a very good position objectively. I like the move a5 there, but I'm going to try to choose I don't know, just a really, really basic way to play. That won't be too complicated to understand. Because a5 will not always be available. If that pawn was just back on b2, then all of a sudden, if I told you guys, hey, a5 here is just an amazing move for black, well, if the pawn was on b2, you wouldn't have a5. And then you'd be like, okay, well, great, what am I supposed to do now? So the way that I'm going to show you to play is a way that I think you can just always use. Playing against this pawn. Okay, rook b3. I like the move. It does look to me like his intention is to play b5, so I'm just gonna play a6 and make it like real obvious what I'm trying to do. Pawns on light squares in general, I'm gonna be happier with. But really love the way the opponent's playing. Good stuff. All right, a4. Now b5 is not a threat. Let's start with that because this rook is hanging down there. So we can start with the fact that I don't even think that's playable. I'm gonna get my knight into this great square. It also threatens a pawn, which is never bad. Bishop d2 is probably the best move for him, but again, this is not a concern right now. Most positions with an isolated pawn usually have a knight on f3, which means most times when dealing with these situations, you probably want to play the move f6 at some point. So this will probably be the next move on the horizon for me. It's being hit here. I'm interested in taking, but at the moment, I'm not sure if taking makes things the absolute easiest for me, especially because I'm threatening this pawn. But you know, I'm gonna stick to the basics here. I was kind of talking about how I always wanted to play knight against bishop, so I am gonna take it and play that position. I'm not sure that it's the absolute best here, but I do kind of like it in principle, so I'll play bishop takes knight. Knight against bishop, and I've got all my pawns on light squares. So really the only reason that I would that I would get rid of his isolated pawn is I've got one of these matchups, let's call it, that I said I was looking for, right? I kind of wanted to play this, so that's the only reason. Knight takes bishop definitely could be played, but I don't think I'm gonna go for that. I'll put another pawn on a light square here, and most likely what I'm gonna do next is f6 and king f7, start to bring my king in. The other idea would be to play king in to f5 like that, so we'll see. But I'm just gonna put another pawn on a light square. b5. It's unfortunate considering it's been a tremendous game from white. So this blunder is a little underwhelming. Would g6 be a bad move? Yes, I would say g6 is a bad move. Too many pawns on light squares, you're losing your dark square control. But I think f6 and king f7 is a good balance. This is really unfortunate. He absolutely played a great game, and now is going to be in a worse spot. So now because I'm up 2 pawns, I'm going to take. Now I'm going to take. And the only reason is he blundered a pawn there, so I know that the simplest way to win is always going to be to just trade. So take here. He didn't even take back, which is another blunder for him. So, man, a really great game. But then b5, and then just not taking my knight. All of a sudden, we're going to win this game sort of really handily, but did not expect to do that. We're going to give a check. As the king goes here, then we can give another check. And now I save my knight. I can also go take this pawn. And of course, because our h-pawn is here, we're not worried about getting mated on the back rank. So that's check, and I think we can take here. And I would say most likely, after taking here, I think rook b3 is a pretty understandable blunder, running into knight d2. So I think this is pretty good. The only other move I'm considering is h4 because it threatens to checkmate in a couple moves. But h4, he can play g4. I don't think it's the best move if he plays g4. So I'm not gonna play Not gonna play hope chess. I'm just gonna play the best chess. I think this one is the best. Rook b3, then knight d2. And if he plays g3 to try to get out of that, then we would just play b4. So let's go here. Now with the rook gone, I am more interested in h4. Now if g4, I'll take that. So the first thing I'm going to calculate is this. b4 takes b3. Can't take it because of that. g3 to get the king out. And now I can't actually play b2, which is unfortunate. Can't really play it. So I have two moves that I would consider here. The first one is h4. Like I said, I'm very interested in that. The other one is rook d7, because that'll guard this pawn, and it'll allow me to push this pawn, and the rook can never actually catch it on the b file. So rook d7 will always be there, it looks like. I think I'm going to start with h4, because now if he plays g4, I can also win a pawn there. But now it's a lot better than when the rook was on a3, because now g4, nothing would happen. We wouldn't win a pawn. But with the rook gone, now we would actually win a pawn. He doesn't play it. We all know what we played h4 for, to guard our knight. So this is double check. 2 checks. Can't take it. Now we're able to deliver this sort of hook checkmate. Like that. Really good game by my opponent there. My opinion. Thought he played well. I would not be surprised to see the game review reflect that. And look at that. 77.3. A very nice game by White. His blunders all came at the end, unfortunately. Caro-Kann, knight f6, knight c3. Definitely not a top move. Not a mistake by any means, but not a top move. And yeah, we knew this was a mistake by him early on, but I really think that he just didn't want to bring his queen out early, and I respect you, man. Keep doing that. I guarantee it's going to serve him well. We just played a nice, simple move. Go back. Always think this is something that needs to be highlighted for people so that you don't get the impression that once you bring your queen out, you have to like keep it out and just like move to all these squares that get attacked. I think this is a lot easier to understand. E6. Okay, we got developed, trades, h6, h3. He was playing really well. I was a fan of queen f5. He goes here, and he's just playing great here. A6, just to stay, stay on the light squares. Our game is all about light squares. We go A6, he goes A4, bring the knight in, knight E5, and okay, decided to take the knight. And definitely taking on E3 is an option here, but I went for H5, planning F6, and the reason why I played H5 is because I want to play F6 and take with the pawn, and I couldn't do that right there. Doubling the rooks was always an option there, but I wanted to play F6 because that bishop was about to come into D6 on the dark squares. Again, pretty tough to handle. So this was just unfortunate. He'd played such a good game up to here. Really, really played well. And then when it came down to it, that's a blunder. That's okay. I decided to simplify, and he didn't even take my piece back. Ouch. It looked so good, and then just blunder, blunder in a row. And then we were able to get the mate. But I thought he really played well overall. And his idea to not bring the queen out, I totally respect. So that was the Caro-Kann. I like this knight f6 line. Knight c3, I actually haven't really seen that move too much. But just remember to get your bishop out, then e6 after, never e6 first. And then your standard Caro-Kann moves are always, you know, you want this structure in the Caro-Kann. Knight f6, knight d7, bishop e7 or d6, castle, maybe h6, queen somewhere, c7, b6, a5, depends on what his setup looks like. And then bring some rooks to the middle of the board. You know, it's really that simple. We played like a 1400. Yeah, it's all relative, eh? You don't have to play like a GM. If your opponent is playing like a 1000, a 950, all you need to do is play like a 1400 and you'll beat him. You don't have to waste your energy. If I played like a 2800 this game, there would be a lot of wasted talent there, right? I only have so many good moves I can play in my chess career. If I only need to play like a 1400 to win, then I only will. Not gonna overexert myself. Not gonna waste all my good moves. They're unnecessary. I have a limited number.